Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we really get into those stories, the ones that kind of stick with you, and we try to peel back all the layers to see what's really going on underneath. Today, we're looking back at a case that, well, it basically took over the internet for a while and honestly still sparks a lot of debate. The vanishing of Elisa Lam. Now, many of you listening probably remember that elevator footage, right? It's unforgettable. Or maybe the really grim details of how she was eventually found. But today, we want to go deeper than just the headlines, beyond the sensational stuff, and try to understand the whole complex picture. Elisa, she was just 21 back in 2013. A bright Canadian student full of curiosity on this big solo adventure down the West Coast. You could see her journey unfolding online, actually. She had these blogs where she shared everything, fashion, writing, art, just painted this picture of a really vibrant, smart young woman. But then her adventure takes this really sudden, chilling turn when she checks into this hotel in Los Angeles, a place with a real reputation. Her last known moments, they were caught on that elevator camera. It's this bewildering, almost frantic display. She seems so disoriented. It went viral almost instantly and just left millions asking, what happened. She just disappeared. And this is where the story gets really, really perplexing. Her disappearance wasn't solved by some clue or a detective's insight. It was weeks later because of this horrifying discovery. Guests at that same hotel, the Cecil, started complaining, first about low water pressure, but then about the water itself. It was discolored, blackish, and had this awful taste, a foul smell. So a maintenance worker goes up to check the water tanks on the roof. He looks into one of these huge sealed tanks and finds Elisa, her body, naked, floating in the water. How? How did she get in there? Was it some kind of tragic, bizarre accident? Or is there something else going on, something more sinister? That's what we're diving into today. We're going to unpack every part of this case, challenge those easy answers, and maybe confront some uncomfortable truths.
It really is a fascinating case, mainly because I think the human mind just struggles, doesn't it? It struggles to square such a tragic end with a sequence of events that just feels impossible. The circumstances were just so unusual, so counterintuitive. They didn't fit how we expect things to work. And because of that, people immediately started looking for more complex answers, maybe more dramatic explanations. It became this huge internet obsession precisely because it just defied any simple explanation. So our mission today really is to sift through it all. The facts, the countless theories that popped up, the chilling context of the hotel itself, and try to understand what really happened and maybe why our imaginations were so ready to, run wild with it.
Absolutely. And to really get a handle on this, we need to see Elisa Lam as more than just a case file name. We need to understand her as a person. Elisa, her birth name was Lam Ho Yi. She was 21, from Vancouver, British Columbia. Her parents were immigrants from Hong Kong, and they ran a restaurant, Paul's Restaurant, up in Burnaby. And she had this real creative spark. Loved fashion, writing, classical books, experimental art, you name it. She poured so much of this onto her blogs, Ether Fields, Nouvelle Nouveau on Tumblr. Thousands of posts, images, writings. It really shows this bright, inquisitive mind, a deep inner world, a unique artistic eye, but then woven right into all that creativity, you find these incredibly honest, almost raw reflections about her mental health. She wrote openly about her fears, about dropping classes at university, feeling directionless and lost. Posts from late 2012, early 2013, they hint at this real paranoia, like making a new Facebook account for the 5th time because she felt watched. She wrote about the very start of my depression, feeling very low. You can almost feel her anxiety through the screen. Worries about her big mouth getting her into trouble, risking being beaten up. It's heartbreaking, really. This picture of a thoughtful young woman grappling with some really significant internal battles.
And that's the crucial context. Beyond just her personality and creativity, the clinical side. The investigation later revealed her diagnosis, bipolar disorder and depression. And she was prescribed, quite a cocktail of medications to manage it. Things like dexedrine, Wellbutrin, lamotrigine, quetiapine, multiple stimulants, antidepressants, mood stabilizers. That list alone tells you how serious and complex her condition was and how vital it was for her to stick to that treatment plan. It's also important to remember her family, understandably, kept her mental illness private at first for months after she went missing. It only came out later. We also know from records she had a history of not always taking her medications consistently. And this had led to problems before, episodes of hallucinations like hiding under her bed and at least one hospitalization. But, and this is key, there was no reported history of suicidal thoughts or attempts. So her struggles were real, absolutely, but so were her dreams, her desire to travel and explore. Which really makes you wonder, how did those internal struggles interact with the world she stepped into, especially in a new city? alone at a place like the Cecil.
Yeah, that really frames her journey differently. She wasn't just a diagnosis, she had ambitions. And it was that desire for adventure that brought her to LA. She arrived January 26, 2013. 2 days later, January 28th, she checks into the Cecil Hotel. Now, the Cecil, wow, what a place. It was also partly operating as Stay on Main then, sort of a budget hotel within the hotel. But the Cecil itself, its history is just staggering. It started grand, luxury, Hollywood elite, but over the decades, it declined a lot. Ended up as budget lodging right near Skid Row, an area with, well, significant challenges. And the hotel itself just collected this incredibly dark reputation. We're talking suicide, some really tragic people landing on pedestrians below, unsolved cases like Pigeon Goldie Osgood back in '64. And then the connection to serial offenders. It's chilling. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, he stayed there in '85, reportedly just dumped his bloody clothes in the hotel dumpster. Then later in '91, Jack Unterweger, the Austrian serial offender, was a guest too. The former manager, Amy Price, she apparently saw something like 80 people pass away in her 10 years there. Just think about that. 80. They tried to segment it, hostel rooms as Stay on Main, private rooms as Cecil, separate lobbies. But you couldn't really escape the building's aura. It just felt heavy with its past.
It's almost like the building itself had memories, that kind of palpable atmosphere. And that stark contrast to Lisa's bright, maybe vulnerable energy against the backdrop of this grim, almost oppressive place. It sets a deeply unsettling stage.
It really does. So Elisa checks in, and at first things seem okay. She's put in a shared room, 5th floor, hostel style. But okay, let's unpack this. Within just 2 days, by January 30th, her roommates complained. They reported odd behavior. It was disruptive enough that the hotel staff had to move her. They put her in a private room, same floor, just to, keep the peace. The investigation found out this behavior included leaving weird notes for her roommates, things like go home, go away, and apparently she even set up a password requirement just to get into her own room. That suggests, well, a real state of heightened paranoia, even early on. January 31st, 2013, that was the last day anyone saw Elisa Lam alive. She was actually meant to check out that day, head up to Santa Cruz. Her last known interaction in public was at the Lost Bookstore. The manager there, Katie Orphan, remembered her, said she was outgoing, very lively, very friendly. Elisa was buying books, planning to take them home as gifts for her family, wondering if they'd be too heavy to carry. It's such a poignant image, isn't it? Someone looking forward to going home. Makes what happened next even harder to grasp. See, Elisa usually called her parents every single night. Daily contact. When they didn't hear from her on the 31st, they knew something was wrong. They flew down to LA immediately, filed a missing persons report on February 2nd.
And right away, investigators hit a wall. The initial search was just baffling. The LAPD, Elisa's parents were there too. They searched the Cecil top to bottom, the surrounding streets. They even brought in police dogs, trained scent dogs. But incredibly, the dogs couldn't pick up her scent. Not in the hallways, not even on the roof. Her private room, the one she was moved to, completely undisturbed. Wallet, ID, laptop, all her medications. Just left there. No sign of forced entry, no struggle, nothing obviously wrong. That kind of lack of initial clues, especially the scent dogs drawing a blank, it's incredibly frustrating for investigators. And it just fuels public speculation, creates this void that theories rush in to fill. A really confusing start. Then came the moment that changed everything. The thing that pushed this case onto the global stage, February 14th, 2 weeks after she vanished. The LAPD took the pretty unusual step of releasing security footage, 4 minutes of it, from inside one of the Cecil's elevators, time-stamped February 1st, Elisa Lam's last known moments. And what's truly incredible isn't just what she does in the video, but how the footage itself became this instant global phenomenon. It turned a local missing person case to something everyone was talking about. Just picture watching this. Elisa gets in the elevator. She pushes, it looks like, a whole bunch of buttons, maybe several floors, but the doors don't close. She walks up to the door, slowly peeks her head out, glances side to side really quickly, like she's checking the hallway for someone or something. Then she pulls back inside, presses herself right into the corner, against the wall, almost like she's hiding from someone just outside the elevator. She goes back to the door, looks out again, then she's just making these really strange hand gestures, these sort of random fluid movements, presses more buttons. Finally, she steps out of the elevator, and she seems to be talking or gesturing, maybe both, to someone or something unseen in the hallway. Her movements just look random, dazed. And the elevator doors, which stayed open this whole bizarre time, they finally close. But only after she's walked away, out of the camera's view.
That video, it is genuinely haunting. The first time I saw it, like so many people, I kept thinking, who is she talking to? Is someone there? Because it looks so performed almost without context. And you can imagine how hard that makes the search, right? You've got this footage that just doesn't seem to make logical sense. The way it exploded online, everyone had a theory. It was massive. But the search for Elisa didn't end because of the video. It ended because of something completely unexpected and frankly horrifying. Guests at the Cecil. They started complaining. First, it was just low water pressure. Annoying, sure, but not alarming. But then the complaints got worse. The water was coming out colored black. It had an unusual taste, a foul smell. Can you even imagine turning on the tap and seeing that? And some guests had apparently been drinking it, bathing in it for days, unknowingly. Wait until you hear this next part. February 19th, almost 3 weeks after Elisa was last seen. A maintenance worker, Santiago Lopez, gets sent up to investigate these complaints. He goes to the roof where the hotel's water system is. These 4 huge 1,000-gallon tanks that supply the whole building. He looks into one of them. Apparently the lid was open, and he makes this just horrifying discovery. Elisa Lam's body, floating face up, naked in that murky water. The details that came out later were just awful. Her body was moderately decomposed, bloated, greenish in color, skin separation. Her clothes, her watch, her room key, they were found in the tank, too, at the bottom, coated with this sort of sandy particulate. And getting her out was a major operation. They had to drain the entire tank, all 1,000 gallons, and then physically cut it open because the maintenance hatch was too small for the equipment needed. Just a truly grim, deeply disturbing end to the search, bringing this awful reality to all the strange things happening at the Cecil.
The official ruling came just 2 days later, February 21st. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office concluded her passing was accidental due to the consequence of drowning. But, crucially, they also listed bipolar disorder as a finding of other conditions contributing but not related to the immediate cause of death. The full report with the toxicology results wasn't released until June 2013, and that added more layers. The tox report showed traces of her prescribed meds, bupropion, an antidepressant, metabolites of mood stabilizers. But significantly, no antipsychotics were detected. Those were a key part of her treatment. They did find some non-prescription stuff like Sinutab, ibuprofen, but no illegal drugs at all, and only a tiny trace of alcohol, 0.02 gram percent, basically nothing. The really crucial takeaway from the toxicology was that her overall medication levels were lower than expected. It strongly suggested she was under-medicating or had stopped taking her medications recently. But despite this official finding, the public reaction was just overwhelming skepticism, disbelief. It seemed like almost nobody wanted to just accept the coroner's conclusion, which really makes you ask, right? Why?
Why was this official explanation so hard for people to accept? I think it was the sheer strangeness of how she ended up in that tank, combined with that unsettling elevator video. It just created this deep distrust, this demand for answers that felt more, I don't know, more intriguing, maybe more sensational. It's a really powerful example of how a compelling mystery can sometimes just overshadow the scientific and medical facts.
Yeah, that public skepticism is absolutely central to this whole story. It felt like everyone online became a detective overnight, digging for clues, and naturally, many people jumped straight to foul play. There were so many arguments pointing towards someone else being involved. Elisa's own blog posts, right? Mentioning fears of creepers, worrying her big mouth would cause problems. Her behavior in the elevator video, hiding, looking around frantically, it looked to many like she was being chased. Then there was the whole issue of getting onto the roof. It was supposedly locked, people said, alarmed. Though, key point, hotel records later showed no alarms went off around that time. The detail often gets lost. And the lid on the water tank. People insisted it was incredibly heavy, that she couldn't possibly have lifted it herself. It made an accident seem impossible. Plus her phone was missing, and their Tumblr blog kept posting after she was gone. That looked really suspicious to a lot of people. Pointed towards someone else having access or control. So, with all that seemingly pointing towards foul play, what did the actual police investigation find? Were these theories about being chased or an insider ever substantiated? People even latched onto that metal artist, right, Pablo Vergara. Released a song about a drowning woman at the Cecil. He became a suspect just because of bad timing and dark lyrics until that was cleared up.
It's fascinating how easily circumstantial bits, often without full context, get woven together into these really compelling but ultimately unsupported narratives. So let's break down those foul play theories based on what the investigation actually found. First, the autopsy revealed absolutely zero bruises, no signs of struggle, no signs of bodily harm whatsoever on Elisa's body. That's crucial. It rules out an assault. And what's incredible is, all her belongings were accounted for in her room or the tank, except for a cell phone she'd reportedly lost weeks before her trip even began. So robbery was out. Eyewitnesses, hotel staff, Katie Orphan from the bookstore, they all said she was completely alone in her last known interactions. Security cameras didn't pick up anyone else near her around the time of the elevator incident. And being new to the city, she didn't really have connections there, which makes a planned attack seem unlikely. Now, the phone and Tumblr. Detectives confirmed the phone was lost pre-trip. And Tumblr, it has a queue feature. You can schedule posts way in advance. So her blog continuing didn't mean someone else was posting. It was automated. Okay, what about those autopsy ambiguities people online obsessed over, like the crossed out unknown, the notes about subcutaneous pooling near the anal area, the prolapsed rectum? Pathologists were clear. Those can be artifacts of decomposition, the bloating process in water. They acknowledged being initially ambivalent, perhaps, but ultimately confirmed the accidental ruling once all evidence, including toxicology in the scene, was considered. And the roof access is a huge point of debate. The hotel actually had 4 different ways to get to the roof. 3 were via fire escapes, which had no alarms. This was actually demonstrated later by a guest on YouTube, proving it was possible and not as secure as people thought. And the water tank lids, often described as these impossibly heavy things. Turns out they were either opened or lighter than originally assumed, easily movable by someone Elise's size, or, crucially, the one she was found in was simply already open, just as the maintenance worker found it. Later court documents even described how someone could climb onto a utility structure and jump down to the tank area. Surprisingly accessible. Finally, that elevator door staying open so long. Detectives figured it out. Elisa pushed the door hold button, bottom of the center row, twice. That button can keep the doors open for up to 2 minutes. Plus, her moving in and out of the doorway would have kept triggering the sensors, preventing closure. So if we step back and look at the big picture, that human tendency for a dramatic story often ignores the simpler, though deeply tragic, facts. The investigation meticulously ruled out foul play, which points us firmly back towards Elisa herself and her internal state.
That's a really thorough breakdown. It counters so many of the things you hear repeated online. But I imagine, even with all that evidence, the accidental drowning ruling just feels unsatisfying for a lot of people. There's still that gap between the logical explanation and, well, how bizarre it all seems isn't there. Because if foul play is off the table, then everything hinges on Elisa's state of mind. The core argument then becomes she suffered a severe manic episode, maybe a psychotic break, linked to her bipolar disorder. And this happened leading up to and including February 1st. And looking back at that toxicology report, it seems to fit, right? No antipsychotics in her system. Traces of antidepressants like bupropion, which you mentioned, can actually trigger mania in some people with bipolar disorder. And just generally low levels of her needed meds, plus no illicit drugs, no significant alcohol. It wasn't intoxication driving her behavior.
You've nailed the core tension. Our minds love a clear narrative, a cause and effect we understand. And sometimes the truth, even when backed by evidence, just doesn't provide that neat story we crave. But let's really dive into the medical evidence here. The symptoms of a severe manic episode, especially one with psychotic features, what does that actually look like? It can totally scramble someone's thoughts and perceptions. We're talking potential hallucinations, seeing, hearing, pasting things that aren't real, intense delusions fixed, false beliefs that feel absolutely true to the person, extreme paranoia, sometimes even catatonia affecting movement, and a critical lack of insight the person doesn't realize they're ill. Her state could be described as this kind of disorganization yet appearing singularly focused. Think about her in the elevator, randomly pushing buttons, but with this weird intensity, as if following some internal script driven by delusions. Mania can also cause something called psychomotor agitation. That means repetitive, purposeless movements. Things like hand-wringing, pacing, and sometimes even taking off clothes repeatedly. And look at Lisa, her strange hand gestures in the video, her pacing and darting looks, and, critically, ending up naked in the tank with her clothes found separately. It aligns perfectly with these symptoms. Just trying to get to the roof itself could have been a response to hallucinations or delusions. Maybe she felt pursued or drawn there by something only she perceived. Her roommates reporting odd behavior, her history of medication noncompliance, the specific actions on the tape. It all converges incredibly consistently with a severe manic episode, likely made worse by being alone in a strange place, maybe not sleeping well, losing that daily contact home. And there's this unsettling parallel that adds another layer. A confidential source, Resident A, told investigators about a relative in Mexico, also diagnosed with bipolar disorder. This relative tragically passed away by drowning in a similar industrial water tank. Apparently, this person had a history during manic episodes of running away and being strangely drawn to water. Makes you wonder, could there be some unrecognized pattern here? A kind of gravitation towards water during certain psychotic states. It's not in the textbooks, but anecdotally you hear things. Water's reflective, immersive quality. Maybe it holds a strange allure for someone whose reality is fracturing. It's a disturbing thought, and maybe an area for more understanding.
Wow, that is an incredible and deeply chilling parallel, suggesting something we maybe don't fully grasp about these episodes. But beyond the official findings and the medical context, the Elisa Lam case just morphed into this huge cultural thing, didn't it? Fueled by perceived coincidences, really wild conspiracy theories. And this is where it gets really strange. One of the most popular theories online involves something called the elevator game, or elevator to another world. It's apparently this, like, Korean or Japanese urban legend, a paranormal ritual. You press elevator buttons in a specific sequence to travel to another dimension. And there are rules, like don't look at the mysterious woman who might show up. People saw Elisa's behavior in the elevator and immediately thought, she's playing the elevator game. Or maybe she got stuck in that other world. But what did the investigation say about that? Well, it doesn't really hold up. Elisa pushed random buttons, not a specific sequence. She looked panicked, not ritualistic, and she seemed to be interacting with someone or something in the hall, which breaks the game's rules. It seems more like people projected this existing internet story onto her tragedy because it looked weirdly similar on the surface. And then there was that utterly bizarre TB test conspiracy. Okay, so shortly after Elisa passed away, there was an outbreak of drug-resistant tuberculosis in Skid Row near the Cecil. And the diagnostic test used for that specific strain of TB, by sheer unbelievable coincidence, it's called Lam-Elisa. Now, just to be clear, ELISA is a standard lab technique acronym enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. Lam-Elisa is just the name of the test. But of course, seeing Lam and ELISA together, boom, conspiracy theories exploded. ELISA was a biological weapon. An experiment gone wrong, silenced because she knew too much. Or maybe she was meant to pass away in the water tank to spread the disease and call the homeless population. Some even tried to link it to her university's TB research lab. It's just wild speculation built entirely on a name coincidence. The debunking is simple. Lam-Elisa is a test, not a disease, not a weapon, and the idea of some huge conspiracy being openly discussed online, as they say, if you know about it, it's not a thing.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, the case didn't just spawn its own theories, it tapped into existing stories, especially in pop culture, creating this kind of feedback loop of fascination. The dark water connection is probably the most striking example. That 2005 horror film, a remake of a Japanese movie based on a story by Koji Suzuki, who wrote The Ring, came out 8 years before Elisa's passing. Yet the similarities are just uncanny. A rundown building, a malfunctioning elevator, dark, discolored water coming from the taps, and the discovery of a young girl's body in a rooftop water tank. The mother character in the film even has this panicked elevator scene that feels disturbingly like Elisa's footage. The whole atmosphere of the menacing hotel mirrors the Cecil. It raises that unsettling question. Pure coincidence? Or did Elisa, maybe unconsciously in the grip of psychosis, somehow latch onto or even recreate elements of a film she'd seen? There's a psychological concept called hyperpriming. In acute psychosis, the mind can sometimes make intense connections to things previously seen or experienced media, stories, and they can feel incredibly real, maybe even driving actions. It's rare, but it could potentially explain such a chilling parallel, blurring that line between internal delusion and external influence. And beyond dark water, her story just echoed everywhere. TV shows like Castle did an episode, Watershed, with clear parallels. Elements reportedly popped up in How to Get Away with Murder, even American Horror Story. Hotel. AHS Hotel, the fictional Hotel Cortez. Its dark past, the ghostly residence, feels heavily inspired by the Cecil's real and imagined history, playing on that fear of transient spaces. Elisa's case definitely amplified that perception of the Cecil. Films from Hong Kong, planned Chinese productions, horror scripts like The Bringing all drew inspiration. Musicians too, the Zolas. SKYND did a hot music video recreating the elevator scene. Sun Kill Moon referenced it. And of course, documentaries and web series kept bringing it back. Netflix's Crime Scene. The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, BuzzFeed Unsolved, Ghost Adventures. It just keeps getting revisited. There's even that weird postcode coincidence. Apparently, if you put the postcode for the last bookstore, her last known spot outside the hotel, into Google Maps, it pinpoints Elisa Lam's grave. Just another one of those bizarre little synchronicities that adds to the mystery, even if it's likely just random chance.
It's truly incredible how one tragic event just rippled out, becoming this modern urban legend woven into so much of our culture. As for what happened legally, Elisa's parents did file a wrongful death lawsuit against the Cecil Hotel back in September 2013. They claimed negligence. But the suit was ultimately dismissed in 2015. The judge basically ruled that the hotel couldn't have reasonably foreseen that specific chain of events, especially given the circumstances pointing towards Elisa's mental state being the primary factor. The Cecil Hotel itself, it's had quite a journey since then. Rebranded, closed, reopened. In late 2021, it actually reopened as affordable housing run by the Skid Row Housing Trust. But then it was put up for sale again in 2024, a building forever linked to its dark history and to Elisa's story. So after diving deep into all of this, where does that leave us, those of us listening who followed this journey? The official conclusion hasn't changed. Elisa Lam's passing was ruled an accidental drowning, with her bipolar disorder identified as a significant contributing factor. But despite the evidence, despite the investigation, the case absolutely remains one of the most talked about of this century. An enduring internet mystery. Those bizarre elements, that haunting video, the sheer strangeness of it all, it just leaves gaps that our imaginations rush to fill. It shows how powerfully these stories can grip us.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, I think the Elisa Lam case is a really poignant reminder. A reminder of the dangers of, well, maybe information overload sometimes, and our very human desire for dramatic stories, often over complex, messy realities. Elisa Lam was the person. A bright, creative young woman with so much potential who was grappling with a very serious mental illness. And the relentless speculation, the wild conspiracies, the online gossip, it often completely overshadows that tragic human reality. It reduces her life to a puzzle to be solved, instead of acknowledging the person who was lost, and the very real illness she battled, an illness still burdened by stigma and misunderstanding. Which raises, I think, a really important question for all of us, especially now in this age of instant information and viral mysteries. How do we balance our natural curiosity with compassion? How do we balance our desire for answers, for a neat conclusion, with respect for the truth? Especially when that truth involves something as complex and unpredictable as severe mental illness. The silence left by Elisa's passing. It shouldn't be seen as a blank canvas for us to paint fantasies onto. Maybe it should be a space for deeper understanding, a call to challenge the stigma around mental illness. It forces us to confront that sometimes the most unsettling answers aren't hidden in conspiracies or supernatural events. Sometimes they're deeply, profoundly human and tragically real. It reminds us that behind every headline, every viral video, there's a human story. And that story deserves dignity, empathy, and our genuine effort to understand.